Gordon B. Hinckley served as the 15th president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from 1995 until his death in 2008. He is widely remembered for his approachable demeanor, polished media presence, and efforts to modernize the LDS Church. Under his leadership, temples were constructed around the world and membership grew significantly, not to mention the fact that the church gained global recognition. Many members viewed him as a kind and inspirational grandfatherly figure, often appearing on television and in interviews to promote a positive image of Mormonism. But behind the polished exterior, Hinckley's leadership had major flaws. From secretive financial operations to doctrinal contradictions, questionable statements, and large-scale vanity projects, there were decisions that harmed both members and the church's public reputation. In this video, we're counting down the top 10 fails of Gordon B. Hinckley, exploring the actions and statements that reveal a side of him few outside the inner circle ever saw.
Welcome to the Mormon News Roundup, your go-to source for the latest headlines and critical analysis on all things LDS.
Breaking news!
Join D-Vay's
Mormon News Roundup.
That's talent on loan from Kolob every Sunday and Monday night.
We will uncover the truth behind the news that matters most to the Mormon community.
One of Hinckley's most controversial decisions was founding Ensign Peak Advisors in 1997. This investment arm was designed to manage the church's enormous wealth while keeping it hidden from both the general membership and public and federal regulators. Tens of billions of dollars were funneled into this fund, far beyond what members could see or influence. The structure ensured secrecy under the guise of protecting the church's long-term financial security. But critics argue that this secrecy crossed ethical and legal lines. By deliberately hiding assets, Hinckley enabled a culture of financial opacity, contradicting his later statements about transparency and financial stewardship. While some may defend this as strategic foresight, it represents a fail because it prioritized secrecy and control over honesty and accountability. Members giving their tithing had little insight into how their money was being invested, and the church's extraordinary wealth was effectively invisible to the very people who funded it. Hinckley's bad decision here created both a legal gray area and a moral problem. Gordon B. Hinckley is often remembered as a beloved Mormon prophet of the past, but his legacy holds a darker side. It was under Hinckley's direction that Ensign Peak Advisors was founded, a move steeped in obfuscation, federal law violations, and deception, aimed at misleading both church members and the government for generations. Far from the grandfatherly figure many remember, Hinckley proved to be a shrewd, calculating leader focused on ensuring that LDS members' tithes continued to flow into church coffers. Hinckley's patriarchal approach wasn't merely about faith, it was about building an empire. For many, this hidden chapter raises serious questions about the ethical foundations of his leadership and what it means for his place in LDS church history. So, does Hinckley's charm, quick wit, and encouragement to follow Jesus outweigh the troubling legacy of the Ensign Peak scam? In a 2005 interview with a French journalist, Hinckley made the bold claim that the church was transparent and that members could see exactly how tithing dollars were spent. On its face, this sounds reassuring, but it was completely false. Fail. In reality, only the top leadership of the church has access to detailed financial records. Regular members, well, they only receive vague overviews, while billions of dollars remain hidden.
Your church is very wealthy, and I read the figure of $30 billion, US dollars. What do you respond?
That's somebody's guess. That's just a wild guess. The income of the church comes from the consecrations of the people who tithe themselves, pay their tithes. The ancient law of the tithe is the church's law of finance, and that's where the money comes which operates the church.
In my country, we say people's churches, the Protestants, the Catholics, they publish all their budgets openly to all the public.
Yeah.
Why it's impossible for your church?
Well, we simply think that information belongs to those who made the contribution and not to the world. That's the only thing. Yes.
This statement is particularly troubling because it came from the prophet himself, the supposed mouthpiece of Jehovah. By asserting transparency while actively keeping financial details secret, Hinckley misled millions of members. His dubious claim created a false sense of accountability while protecting the church from any scrutiny. Transparency is essential for trust, especially in religious organizations handling enormous sums of money. For those of us expecting honesty and openness from the highest authority in the church, this was yet another fail. It's a typical example of LDS deception, poor judgment, and a willingness to misrepresent reality to maintain an image of propriety. During Hinckley's tenure, the church undertook the massive City Creek Mall project in downtown Salt Lake City, a $1.5 billion investment. Hinckley publicly claimed that no tithing funds were used for the project. Yet financial reports and timing strongly suggest that tithing and other church resources were indeed involved, making his statements misleading at best.
In the interest of protecting the environment of Temple Square.
Sounds stupid? Have a good time.
While the cost will be great, it will not involve the expenditure of tithing funds.
You're lying. You're lying.
However, the faithfulness of our people continues to be demonstrated in the payment of tithes and offerings. Altogether, I can only report that the Lord is richly blessing His church.
God, you're dumb.
The City Creek Mall was marketed as a commercial development with public benefits, but it also served to increase the church's wealth and influence in the city. Hinckley's assurances in general conference to members painted a picture of separation between sacred funds and business ventures. Yet the reality was totally different. Misleading statements like these erode trust, especially when they come from the church president himself. This fail highlights a pattern in Hinckley's leadership, prioritizing public image over full disclosure and using faith as a shield for questionable financial decisions. Not to mention making claims that are difficult or impossible to verify. The City Creek Mall stands as both a financial and ethical controversy tied directly to Hinckley's tenure. In one memorable general conference address, Hinckley used his prophetic platform to criticize the movie adaptation of the Chicago musical. The film, rated PG-13, contained minimal profanity and relatively mild sexual content. Yet Hinckley lambasted it as immoral, using the authority of his prophetic office to dictate cultural morality to millions of members. This is a curious fail because it reflects both pettiness and poor judgment. While a prophet is expected to guide members spiritually, using his influence to condemn a relatively tame Hollywood musical crosses into triviality. It also shows a disconnection between Hinckley's perception of morality and reality, relying on personal taste rather than universal principles. The broader implication is that members are encouraged to accept his judgment as divinely inspired, even when it concerns entertainment choices. This moment exemplifies how charisma and religious authority can be misapplied to minor cultural issues, turning an otherwise enjoyable film into a target for unnecessary moral policing. For many, it was a bizarre and overreaching display of prophetic power.
Very recently, a certain moving picture was acclaimed the best of the year.
Come on, babe, why don't we paint the town? And all that jazz.
I have not seen it, nor do I anticipate doing so.
And all that jazz.
But I am told that it is laden with sex.
Where the gin is cold, but the piano's hot. It's just a noisy hall.
But I am told that it is laden with sex. That the use of profanity runs throughout.
No one's wife, but all of my life and
Gordon's tenure was marked by repeated statements about LGBTQ+ people that reflected a deeply homophobic worldview. Gordon claimed that same-sex attraction was sinful and insisted that celibacy was the only way for gay members to remain righteous and eventually be with their families in the afterlife. These pronouncements were not casual. They were presented as divine instruction, wielding the authority of the prophet to shame and control gay members. Hinckley's statements caused real harm, reinforcing a culture of fear, secrecy, and self-denial. By framing LGBTQ+ identities as inherently immoral, Hinckley contributed to decades of psychological distress and marginalization within the church. Unlike many failings that may seem abstract or financial, this one had a direct impact on the lives of individuals. It shows how religious authority can be misused to enforce social conformity and restrict personal freedom, using faith as a justification for cruelty. For many members, these teachings remain a source of trauma and anger long after Gordon's death.
We know they have a problem. We want to help them solve that problem.
So here is the clip. You can see on the left just here. TikTok took the video down after like 24 hours because they considered it hate speech. It was determined that your content violates our community guidelines and cannot be restored, much like the gospel. I looked at what TikTok thinks hateful behavior is. It reads as, we do not tolerate content that attacks or incites violence against an individual or a group of individuals on the basis of protected attributes. We do not allow content that includes hate speech, and we remove it from our platform. We also suspend and ban accounts that have multiple hate speech violations.
On Larry King Live, Hinckley declared that polygamy was a thing of the past in the Mormon Church. While this may have sounded reassuring to the general public, it directly contradicts Mormon scriptures, specifically Doctrine and Covenants section 132, which canonizes celestial polygamy as part of current church doctrine.
Now the big story raging in Utah, before we get back to morals and morality, is the big story, if you don't know it, is polygamy in Utah. There's been major charges. The governor, Mike Leavitt, says that there are legal reasons why the state of Utah has not prosecuted alleged polygamists. Leavitt said plural marriage may be protected by the First Amendment. He is the great-great-grandson, is the governor of a polygamist. First, tell me about the church and polygamy. When it started, it allowed it?
When our people came west, they permitted it on a restricted scale.
You could have a certain amount of...
The figures that I have are between 2% and 5% of our people were involved in it. It was a very limited practice, carefully safeguarded. In 1890, that practice was discontinued. The president of the church, the man who occupied the position which I occupy today, went before the people, said he had prayed about it, worked on it, and had received from the Lord a revelation that the time to stop was to discontinue it. Then, that's 118 years ago.
Hinckley's statements here are misleading, sanitizing church history and official doctrine for a mainstream audience. By presenting a simplified narrative, he avoided uncomfortable truths about the church's past and its theological teachings, creating a false sense of closure on an issue that still has doctrinal relevance. This fail demonstrates the tension between public image management and fidelity to Scripture. Members and non-members alike were given a story that didn't match reality, which undermines trust. While Hinckley may have thought he was modernizing the church's reputation, this was a moment where transparency was sanctified for appearances. And the result was a deceptive portrayal of church history that continues to confuse and frustrate those trying to understand Mormon teachings on marriage. Gordon Hinckley sat down with NBC News anchor Tom Brokaw in an interview that was recorded in November 2001 in Salt Lake City ahead of the 2002 Winter Olympics and aired during NBC's Olympic coverage in February of 2002. Now, in this infamous interview, Hinckley made two dubious claims, including that the Mormon Church had donated $600 million to help people in Afghanistan.
As you look at the Lord's purse in the current state of the economy, are you concerned about that?
It affects the church, but we simply tailor our program to fit the purse.
Has the church had to be more active in recent months than it might have been in the last several years in terms of helping out families who've fallen on hard times?
We have, as you know, a great welfare program. We try to take care of our own. We have farms and canneries and milk plant and all those things, clothing operations, where we seek to produce goods that take care of our own, and beyond that, to extend humanitarian aid to those in distress, not of our faith, across the world. Last year, we contributed to humanitarian causes some $72 million. We just authorized a substantial gift of some $600 million of value in goods to the Afghan refugees. We're concerned with the welfare of people, the hunger of people, the distress that people feel, wherever they may be. We want to assist, and we're doing that very substantially.
While the church does engage in some humanitarian work, this figure was vastly inflated and presented without any verification. This fail illustrates Hinckley's tendency to exaggerate the church's accomplishments, presenting an image of overwhelming benevolence that didn't match reality. I mean, this isn't just about numbers. This type of misrepresentation affects credibility and member trust. When the prophet himself makes claims that cannot be substantiated, it opens the church up to criticism and skepticism. Exaggerating charitable work in this way is particularly problematic because it frames generosity as a PR tool rather than a sincere effort to help those who are in need. Members were encouraged to take his words at face value, trusting in his prophetic authority, while the actual impact was far less than he claimed. This fail is yet another example of how public image and messaging were prioritized over transparency and honesty. During Hinckley's tenure, the Proclamation to the Family was issued, a document that laid out strict gender roles and family structures. While it was presented as divine guidance, Hinckley refused to consult with women during its formulation. He rolled it out in the women's session of General Conference without involving anyone in church leadership. This omission highlights a deeply patriarchal approach to leadership where female perspectives were ignored entirely in creation of doctrine that directly affected them.
In 2005, Greg Prince conducted an interview with a woman named Chiko Okazaki. She was the first counselor in the Relief Society from 1990 to 1997. In the interview, Chiko Okazaki discussed many of the same feelings as Eileen Clyde, the second counselor that I shared in my last video. Unfortunately, there's no video or audio for this interview, but it was published in Dialogue. And this is how the interview went. Chiko Okazaki says, "In 1995, when the Family Proclamation was written, the Relief Society was asked to come to a meeting. We did, and they read this proclamation. It was all finished. The only question was whether they should present it at the Relief Society meeting or the priesthood meeting. It didn't matter to me where it was presented. What I wanted to know was how come we weren't consulted." Greg Prince says, "You didn't even know it was in the works?" Chiko Okazaki said, "No. They just asked us which meeting to present it in, and we said whatever President Hinckley decides is fine with us. He decided to do it in the Relief Society meeting. The apostle who was our liaison said, 'Isn't it wonderful that he made the choice to present it in the Relief Society meeting?' Well, that was fine, but as I read it, I thought that we could have made a few changes in it. Sometimes I think that they get so busy, they forget that we are there."
The proclamation reinforces traditional gender roles and marginalizes women, while also contributing to the church's homophobic rhetoric. By framing the document as divinely inspired, Hinckley positioned himself as the ultimate authority, leaving little room for dissent or dialogue. Members are expected to accept these prescriptions without question, perpetuating inequality and limiting agency. This fail is particularly notable because it demonstrates how church leaders can codify paternal power under the guise of divine will. For many, the proclamation remains a symbol of exclusion and a reminder of the limitations women faced under Hinckley's leadership. The number 2 fail of Gordon Hinckley was his handling of the Mark Hofmann forgeries. Another glaring failure. Hofmann produced fraudulent historical documents that, if revealed, could have been embarrassing for the LDS Church. Instead of addressing the issues openly, Hinckley authorized the purchase of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fragile and historically significant documents in order to bury them. This approach prioritizes image over integrity once again. By attempting to hide these mistakes, the church reinforced a culture of secrecy rather than embracing transparency and accountability. Members were kept in the dark about the scandal, and valuable historical records were treated as commodities to protect the church's reputation. Not to mention the fact that 3 people died during this fiasco. This fail highlights a recurring pattern in Hinckley's leadership, protecting the institution at all costs rather than promoting honesty, critical reflection, or public trust. It is a cautionary example of how centralized authority can lead to ethically questionable decisions and how financial resources can be used to conceal rather than solve significant problems. In the 1980s, Mark Hofmann, a skilled forger and con artist, managed to deceive Mormon church leaders into purchasing a series of fake historical documents, including a supposed Book of Abraham papyri and the Salamander letter. Hofmann capitalized on the church's desire to authenticate its history, offering what appeared to be rare documents that would lend further legitimacy to its claims. Using a mix of charm and meticulous forgery, Hofmann convinced top church leaders and scholars within Mormonism that the documents were real. His forgeries were so convincing that they led the church to pay millions of dollars. The scandal unraveled when Hofmann's fraudulent activities were uncovered after a series of bombings he orchestrated to cover his tracks. His deception revealed a darker side to the Mormon Church's obsession with historical validation and led to a major scandal, shaking the church's credibility and its leaders' trust in their historical narrative. Okay, the single biggest fail of Gordon Hinckley was his massive temple building expansion program, which consumed hundreds of millions of dollars of church resources. While temples are central to LDS worship, many of the projects that Hinckley commissioned were costly and arguably vanity-driven. He oversaw the construction of dozens of new temples, often prioritizing quality and geographic spread over quality and necessity. And a number of his temples were produced in a shoddy way and had to be retrofitted just a few years later. Critics argue that this was a misallocation of the church's vast financial resources, especially in light of the secretive wealth managed through Ensign Peak Advisors.
I'm now pleased to announce our intent to build temples in Houston, Texas, and in Porto Alegre, Brazil. All of this speaks of our great interest in vigorously moving forward this important work. Altogether, I think we have about 17 in some course of construction, and that's a prodigious undertaking.
This personal obsession of his with temple expansion symbolizes a broader pattern in Hinckley's leadership, a focus on appearances and legacy rather than substantive services or accountability. For many observers, these projects represent the ultimate expression of misused resources under the guise of spiritual progress. Now, rather than focusing on social welfare, education, or transparency, Hinckley funneled money into monumental projects that enhanced the church's prestige but offered limited public benefit to the world. And that's it, folks, the top 10 fails of Gordon B. Hinckley. Even though many people remember him as a charismatic, media-savvy prophet who guided the LDS Church through a period of growth and modernization, the simple fact is that when we look closely at his tenure, a different picture emerges. From financial secrecy to doctrinal misstatements, homophobic rhetoric, paternal leadership, and extravagant temple projects, Hinckley's leadership had serious flaws that affected members and the public alike. These top 10 fails highlight the tension between charisma, authority, and accountability. They show how a revered leader can mislead, exaggerate, and prioritize image over substance. For members who trusted Gordon Hinckley, these failures were more than embarrassing. They were moments that shaped their faith, understanding, and lives in profound ways. Now, if you found this breakdown revealing, be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell. Oh, and one last thing. Gordon Hinckley, I will dismiss you without further argument.
You had looked over my kingdom and my greatness and glory. Now you want to take possession of the whole of it. I have a word to say concerning these people.
If they do not hit the like and turn on notifications and subscribe to the Mormon News Roundup right fucking now,
they will be in my power.